BRO-Jogan.
Perfect. And we are recording now. Hey Adi, how are you?
Pretty good. It's
Yeah.
a nice Thursday evening.
Nice
Yet
Thursday
another
evening.
Thursday evening.
Bit cold as well, but then nice and warm inside.
Yes.
Yeah. We had an awesome podcast last time. I really liked it, especially Adi and Deepa and you both were here, and then the way we were sharing and all.
Yeah.
But I feel like we wanted to touch upon a lot of other topics, but then we couldn't do it because time didn't permit us
That's
to
true.
proceed further. So the main thing which I wanted to talk about was Greek history and also the banking system and monetization,
Yeah.
and who can be better than you in terms of financial system and banking system and having an in-depth idea about all those things. So I wanted to do it, and I think today is the right time. So let's just dig in. What do you think?
Absolutely. Not an expert in this field in any way, but yeah, I
See,
think
you have guided me so many times, and I remember spending money in cryptocurrency, having a knowledge from you, like a kind of a KT knowledge transfer from you on bitcoins
Yeah.
and a lot of other. Even I didn't even know what cryptocurrency was
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, but then let's not talk about cryptocurrency today. Let's just talk about
Absolutely.
the monetization and the banking system. Uh, what do you think? Whatever is going on right now,
Yeah.
and whatever we have been seeing, the history of monetization. The way we started building banks and then started giving our money to them. Do you think this is sustainable?
Yeah, I think right now from where we are overall from financial system, we are at a very, very interesting stage of the system right now. It's like last 50 years, I think. And yeah, from if you just look at what's been happening, there was an interesting event that happened like in 1970s, and that was essentially that has shaped the banking system right now. Before that, also in general, currencies were there. Banks have been there for thousands of years. But yeah, what happened in I think 1970s, I think that's where it would be a good starting point for us to discuss banking system right now.
What happened in 1970?
1970 was when we got off the gold standard. And what that means is, till now, if you think about it, money for thousands of years was just precious metals, right? Like it was just gold,
Commodity.
silver, commodity based.
Spices and everything you can
Exactly. So money was essentially commodity of some kind for thousands of years. Whatever we would exchange and whatever is the most saleable commodity. If whatever could be sold to maximum number of people, I know that could work as money because that is the most liquid commodity in the market.
So
if I can't sell my a particular commodity, that can't work as money because not enough people want it at any point of time in exchange for other things, so that can't become money.
So barter system you're talking about.
So this is like a very specialized kind of barter system where one commodity is what everybody is willing to exchange any other item for, right? That's when you have money. Barter system would be absolute barter system initially was no money. Like essentially I would exchange my food for your cattle or milk for something else and stuff like that. So, but then eventually we figured that that's not very efficient way of dealing with things. So then we came up with forms of money. Initially it was like, probably seashells or probably, it depends on what time of our history it was. So different forms of money have come up. Most commonly it was gold.
So we got off of gold system from
Exactly.
1970.
So for thousands of years, gold was essentially the form of money, and then last few hundred years we came up with paper money. So essentially people realized that you can't carry around gold in your pocket paying for things, and that's when banks were
in
like
1970s.
So I'll tell you, like a brief history is like essentially after when actual in industrial revolution and before that in Europe the trade of spices and all of that was at peak. That's when banks were also coming up, especially in Venice and lot of these big countries which were trading ports also. So there were a lot of banks, and banks were like, okay, you have these kind of you're trading, you're paying in gold, but carrying gold is a hassle. and you don't know, you can't divide gold into like 10 different pieces, so you can't pay for like very small items. So why don't you give your gold to us, we will keep it as a deposit and we'll issue a receipt in return, and that's what you can take around. We can issue smaller denominations of receipt also. I can issue 10 different receipts of smaller this thing. So that's how like the basic concept of paper money came up.
And that's bond, I guess, right? I remember people used to call it bond. So spend this much money or invest this much money in my bank, and I'll give you a bond, and that is a legitimate document that which shows that you have this much money in this bank, and that somehow turned into paper money.
Yes, so it's essentially a IOU. It's a liability, right? Like paper money will be a liability because you can redeem it for something else. That's not money. Paper money is not money. It's a receipt of money. It's a redeemable kind of paper, like a paper which you can go to the bank and get actual money. That's what everybody's understanding of money was for hundreds of years before last century. That's what people understood, that oh, this is not money, this is a receipt of money, I can always redeem it. And that's why even on dollar notes they used to say, I promise to give you this many ounces of gold in return for a dollar bill.
Right.
So what happened was in 1970 these guys realized, in 1900s beginning they started doing something called fractional reserve banking. So essentially they realized soon that people are not actually redeeming their gold. Gold is there lying. Nobody knows how much gold is there. People are just trading paper receipts, and now nobody cares about gold, kind of. And we can actually give away more receipts than how much gold we have in our bank account. So they started this very creative idea called fractional reserve banking. They're
Fooling
like,
people.
we can always do this. Why not loan more money than there is actually in the system? That way people will be more productive. They'll pay back. That way economy will grow. There was this interesting gentleman called Keynes, Maynard Keynes. He's a super famous economist, and he is the economy the school of thought of his economics that he taught is the most prevalent kind of school of thought which is there right now in the world. Everybody follows Keynesian school of economics. All major countries, almost all of them. There was a whole parallel school of thought called Austrian School of Economics. We'll probably get to that maybe in the next, if we talk about Bitcoin and stuff like that, because it's much more related to that and why Austrian School of Economics is now sort of becoming more important than ever before. So he's sort of came up with a whole complex mathematical framework of how it's possible that fractional reserve banking works. And then Federal Reserve and all central banks started doing this. Now they have just a small fraction, probably 1 to 10% of gold reserves that were there in their bank account, and they would issue 10 times the number of amount of money in the system as loans. So that's essentially what the fractional reserve banking was, and that became unsustainable in 1970s. Then people started because all the countries would deposit their gold to US because US was the superpower after World War II. They started asking for their gold back, and they did not have enough gold, and they realized that they would actually have either go bankrupt or the whole system has to change or do something, otherwise it'll all collapse. So the president that time, I think it was Richard Nixon.
So let me understand this. So basically, we had less gold, but we provided people with more slips, paper money. And then when people came back to the bank and asked their gold, we didn't have enough gold.
Exactly.
And if we didn't have gold, that means they have to produce because they already give the receipt to everybody, which is legitimate. And if they cannot provide that, then government has to probably file bankruptcy, or maybe they have to, but they have to return something, right?
Or they will go on war or something, because this is between countries, right? And if US holds, like in Fort Knox, which is the place which is like the most secure place on earth apparently, that's why they hold all the gold. And after World War, all the gold was sort of moving to US because Hitler was like on the rise in Europe, and everybody was scared that he will invade our country and he will steal all our gold. So they had a safe ally in US, so they all started moving their gold to US. Eventually it all ended up in Fort Knox, where it was all secured. And US is like, we are your big brother. We will issue the global reserve currency, which is the US dollar now. and against your gold, and we'll manage, don't worry about it. And all the countries are like, perfect, we are anyway so broke after World War that we'll trust you. They did that. It worked well for almost for 30 years after World War II. In 1970 is when it started breaking, like the system, that the gold reserves were not enough against how much paper receipts were there and stuff like that. And
Sorry to interrupt you, but is that the reason why all the international transaction happens in dollars, but not
exactly,
in, because
yes,
dollar is a currency which all the countries have decided to use for their higher transactions, and especially for oil,
yeah,
basically,
yeah,
because US is invading all the different countries just to get all the oils from them and
yeah.
then
So they
pay
had
them
a lot
in.
of leverage after World War II to decide such things. So there was this whole Bretton Woods agreement after World War II where they decided, where on paper it got legitimized that US dollar will be the world reserve currency. So now Federal Reserve has two tasks. Not only do they have to manage their monetary policy within US to ensure that the economy is stable, they also have to export these dollars outside the country. So they have to manage balance. It's like juggling between two massive things where one is like just ensuring that the US economy is working fine and ensuring how many US dollars are printed. Other on the other side, all the other countries are trading in US dollar, and now they demand for it. They also control the supply of US dollar. And what if they start flooding US dollars in one place, and then there is inflation and stuff like that? So they have to manage two different systems: the world economy and the US economy through US dollar. That is a great power and a great responsibility because they can put sanctions and they can control other countries' economy through that. But also that means that they have limited, like they can't do a lot. It's called Triffin's dilemma. Basically, they have a dilemma what to prioritize: US economy or the world economy. So that's what happened after World War II, that they were using US dollar as the world reserve currency, and all the countries sort of agreed to it because US was the superpower. But with gold as a backing, that we this paper receipt is redeemable for these many ounces of gold, uh, that started breaking because they couldn't manage so many different moving pieces. So Richard Nixon in 1970 decided to go off the gold standard, and that's the first time. Now we had gold, then we had paper money on top to back with gold backing. Now you remove the backing. Now it's just paper money floating around with no backing, unlimited supply, can be manipulated by the central bank to unlimited extent, and basically that's the
So that's what you
yeah,
mentioned, that in 1970,
yes,
United States decided to take the gold off as a standard and started printing more money, but
yeah,
there was no benchmark. So basically, what I have heard and I have learned from other people is that gold is the main standard for all the country. Whatever gold they have, they can only print
exactly, yeah,
that much amount of money, and if you print more money, inflation increases. That's exactly what is happening in
yeah,
Venezuela.
yeah.
So Venezuela decided to print their own money. Even Somalia, I guess. Somalia also.
Zimbabwe is another
Oh
country
my God,
where.
Zimbabwe.
So
Yes.
basically, that's what happens. Hyperinflation happens when you end up printing tons of money, and like there's no control on that. So from 1970s onwards, we are living in a world in which the world reserve currency is not a commodity. It's a paper money which is made out of thin air. It doesn't have a backing. It doesn't have a value. Its value is only pertaining to how much we attribute to it. Like, so if I say like if everybody agrees that US dollar is like worthless, there is no scarcity for it, right? Like you need to have some scarcity to determine a value of something. That, oh, this is only limited in this way. Gold was always scarce, and that's why it had value, and that's why people ended up making it money. Paper money never had scarcity, does not have scarcity still. So now, last 50 years, we are living in a very strange experiment of monetary policy, which is sort of, if you think about it, usually things start breaking after that. If you look at like currencies in the past also, their shelf life is usually 50-60 years. After that, any kind of currency which is paper currency, which central banks control or anybody controls, they sort of hyperinflate and die.
So if we are not printing money based on commodity now,
Yeah.
what is the benchmark?
There is no benchmark. It's decided
So
by.
how the economy is still surviving?
So right now, so like what I believe happened in 70s, there was a very interesting change apart from this. This was the biggest change in 70s, but the second biggest change that happened was the boom in the credit markets. So till till 70s, the in general the whole culture of credit in general was not that high. People were still struggling from like the damages of the wars and stuff like that. From 70s, people started living in that state of that state of euphoria that, oh, we need to like we have money at free will, we can lend it out, and central banks started pushing that kind of policy. So if you think about it, that there's right now, if you have heard of the okay boomer meme, that's
No,
sort
I
of.
haven't.
So basically, it's like a. So there was a baby, like baby boomer generation is the generation which were born just after the World War. So people born in 40s, 50s, who came off age or came to their prime age of starting to work, starting their careers in 70s, are the people who are super optimistic about life because they lived after the war. They saw reconstruction, they saw hope, and they had a lot of expectations from their parents, and they treated them like that. They were like the princes of the world, princesses and princes of the world, where you can go out and seize the world. And 70s, when they started working, they started splurging money, and government on the exact same time started offering them so much credit because now we are not on gold standard. You can print, you can lend, you can inflate the credit markets as much as you want, and that's exactly what happened in 70s. The whole culture of like you should not have one house, probably buy two houses. You should not spend this much on student loans and all that. You can splurge more because college degrees are so much more valuable.
Right.
You should have like one car, then you should have a sports car when you retire and stuff like that. So that kind of culture of lavishness started in 70s, and the baby boomer generation took more debt than any other set of demographics that ever has in the history of the world. And that's what we are right now. Why it's an inflection point is because baby boomers are now retiring, and what they are doing is banks that time started the whole system of how 401ks, and right now in Canada how we have RRSP, that why don't you put some money and we'll put all of that money in stock market, and when you retire you'll get $1 million. And the baby boomers started doing that also. They're like, you don't need to save up for the whole house, why don't you just put 5% and we'll put it in stock market. You spend the rest on your next whatever you want to buy, and we will take care of it. When you retire, we'll give you like millions of dollars because we are going to put it in stock market and it's going to be great. And they got great returns. Last 40 years or so, stock market has seen insane boom, which we have not seen like in a long time before. But now all of those people are retiring, and that's the biggest set of people. Think about it this way. Don't think about the economy in the sense of a chunk of one chunk of people. Think of it as different demographics, as different chunks of people. So baby boomer generation is one chunk. There is Gen X, Gen Z, millennials. So think of it as generations. Now in US, just think of it as North America, US in general. From that perspective, baby boomers is the biggest generation of people, biggest set of people that we have ever seen. Now they're all retiring at once.
Exactly.
2019 is when they, on an average, turn 65, and 65 is their retirement age for baby boomers. Now, every single day, 10 to 15,000 people are getting out of the workforce. So, in general, that consumption decreases drastically, and all of them are pulling out all their retirement money. And where is that money getting pulled out of? The stock market.
Right.
And there is massive sell pressure right now because of that. And every single day, if you see Donald Trump tweeting about, oh, we need to keep the stock market up, all of that, the main reason is because he wants all of these baby boomer generation to retire with some money. Otherwise, if the stock market crashes 40%, baby boomers they can't afford to pay the baby boomers their retirement money. And that's massive. And that's why these guys are offering tax cuts to all the corporations to buy back their own shares. So when in the last podcast, when we discussed that why Amazon and Google don't pay taxes, because the condition by Federal Reserve and the government is that you pay zero taxes, but all the tax savings that you do, you buy back your own shares, so that the share stock market
Amazon is buying its own
own shares. So if you see just the number of stock buybacks in the last 10 years, it's exponentially increased. They're buying more shares of their own shares than ever before, because if they don't buy, the sell pressure in the stock market will make the stock market crash, and the people who want to retire can't get their money.
So what if all the baby boomers retires altogether?
Yeah.
And they want their money.
Yeah.
What will happen?
Essentially, if they all retire at once, then the stock market will definitely crash. Right now, they don't have enough savings. So on an average, the median savings and income in general of US and North America, Canada included, savings rate is extremely low. Median, I'm talking, not the 1%, not the 10%, just the median. It's so low that people in general are extending the retirement date. So they're not retiring all at once at 65. Some of them are saying that I'll work for a year or two more because I don't have enough for retirement. So right now, already, even after seeing such a big boom in stock market, they don't have enough to retire. So they're extending their retirement age and stuff like that. So they won't retire all at once. But if they did, stock market will crash. So imagine, like, our stock market is dependent on people retiring. And that's the promise we have given them 40 years ago.
Yeah, so why there was no plan, no backup plan, Basically, that baby boomers will retire in probably 30, 40, 50 years,
Yeah.
right? Not at the same time, but probably, let's say, a gap of 5 years or so.
Yeah.
But why there was there was no visionary who thought about it, that what if all retired together? What if everybody will start asking money? And we decided to take the gold standard, remove the gold standard, and started printing, which will inflate the economy system. And then basically we don't have any base, basically,
Yeah.
right?
So I think
It's like a baseless economy right now.
it is. It's floating in midair and it can go either direction. It's like that feather in the wind, wherever the wind goes, it can get pushed easily. So it's like, when you think about it, it's like when Wall Street, all those quants, all those smart people come up with ingenious ideas. This was one of them. And when you think of index funds is another such idea that was essentially, that's what got created, right? When you think of mutual funds, index funds, these are things that essentially they came up with initially. Now the derivative market is so much more complex than that, but that time they're like, oh, why don't you invest in S&P 500 as a whole? Don't do value investing. Don't do research, because you don't have time for that. You got to buy your next car. You got to send your kids off to college. We will do all of that for you. And
you're investing in 500 different companies,
Yeah.
so definitely you're gonna get benefit
Definitely,
out of it.
of course.
I invested money in S&P 500.
So exactly, imagine everybody starts putting 5% of their money without thinking into a stock market. What does that happen? What is the value of that stock market? That's a mindless value, right? That value is not assigned after thinking by anybody. These are all passive investors. So what happens in that essentially is same as a Ponzi scheme, right? Where people are just throwing money expecting return. कि ये तो short है, like, this stock market is never gonna fall.
100% मिलेगा.
100% मिलेगा, और हर साल 7%. Like, that's not how it works in an economy when right now in stock market, most of the companies are not making enough. So if you see the PE ratio, which is like the profit to earnings or something, or profit to equity or something like that, a ratio which is essentially saying that how much is your stock value compared to how much are you earning. So it can be like a multiple of few, like, I'm earning like 100 million every year. So my market valuation can be like 400, 500 million. So it's 5 times. So maybe in 5 years, the value will catch up types. But right now it's at such high numbers, like 10, 20, 40, 50. That's the P ratios we are seeing. And that's insane. That's like over expectation of the stock market. And that has to correct at some point of time.
Is that the reason why you don't trust RRSP?
I don't trust RRSP is partially is because deep down I don't trust the government to fulfill their promises 40 years down the line. They are not going to be able to fulfill their promises in the next 10 years. I don't even know, like, 40 years later kya hoga. Like, what will be the scenario 40 years later? I can't. And you can't trust a system, especially when you're trapped in it. Like when they say that you put in money, you can't withdraw till retirement. That's
No, you can, but then
you
again,
can't
you
withdraw.
have to. You can.
Okay. Okay.
So basically,
Is
what
it?
happens in RRSP? Let's say you have invested in RRSP, and if you're a first home buyer, you can take 35,000 maximum out of your RRSP, and if your wife is also investing, 70,000 overall couple. But then again, you get 15 years to pay back whatever the
Yeah. So
money you have withdrawn. But let's say if you don't want to pay back, you will be charged tax on it whenever you file your income tax, right? So what I know from it is that initially, let's say the total amount you're withdrawing from your RRSP account is probably 100,000. Okay, so initial 25,000 or probably 30,000, you'll be charged 10%. Second slab would be from 30,000 to probably 50,000, 60,000 would be 15 to 20%. And from 50,000 to 100,000, it would, or whatever the huge amount or the upper limit, it's going to be 30%.
okay.
So basically, you're paying a good chunk of money in taxes,
Yeah.
but it's not like your money is blocked and you cannot do it. You get, it's like it's kind of a penalty.
Yeah.
You have to pay certain extra amount, but it's not blocked. You can anytime, whenever you want, you can withdraw. That's what I know. If you come to know something new, probably I would love to know about it as
No,
well.
from what I understood, it was just like for first home buyers, you can borrow that money because you have to pay it back. That's why I call it borrowing and not withdrawing.
Yeah.
People call it withdrawing so easily, but because you have to pay back in 15 years, then it's not withdrawing, then it's borrowing. You have to return it back at some point, even if it's zero interest. So you can borrow 35,000 from your own RRSP, your own money, you are borrowing it. So that's one thing. But what I understand is you can withdraw at retirement, but you will pay the tax slab that you will be on at when you retire. So you pay tax on it, but essentially only as much, only whatever slab you are in when you retire. So it might be much less, smaller slab, and that's why you save money, and that's about it. But otherwise, the idea is to not let people take that money out till retirement. And
Yeah, government doesn't want you to take money out because it's
Yeah.
their backup plan basically.
Yeah.
You are just giving money to them and they are investing somewhere. You have no idea where it is going. I don't know if you have insights. Like, can you get an insights where government is investing whatever RRSP money you have?
So in North America, the culture is to invest in stocks. Almost 80-90% of investment happens in stock. Probably might be slightly lesser than that, but majority of chunk goes into stocks. It can be in emerging markets, it can be in developed markets, wherever. As opposed to places like Europe and all, where majority is in bonds, which is slightly more conservative and probably I would say better, because bonds are kind of less risky, so much less risky than, but then the returns also will be less. Here it's like the market is on steroids in North America, where it's like you invest, you'll get crazy amount of return, you'll retire rich. But then
I don't understand the crazy amount of returns you're talking about, because if you go to bank, I think how much interest you get? 2%, less than 2% you get on your savings account. Savings account.
Very less.
I feel like India actually gives more interest rate. Even postal services in India, if you invest in postal service, you get more money, especially if you're a senior citizen and if you have more money, you invest in postal services, you get huge amount. I don't remember how much, but then it's way better than what Canada and US provides. I don't know actually about US. I should not comment on it. But then in Canada, whatever we get, it's just peanuts, man.
Yeah, I think US interest rates are also similar. It's like less than 2% types, and overall, even the general interest rates are like 2-3%. That's where the benchmark is.
Which makes me very uncomfortable to invest money in Canada. I feel like if I have enough money, I should go back to India, buy land, because land prices are less booming.
Yeah.
Like property prices are just crazy in India, and it is just going up and up. I haven't seen it's just coming down, because if would have done if it would have happened, I would have bought more property probably. But then Mumbai, I don't know if you know. The price of property you buy in Mumbai. So prices in Mumbai right now, if you want to buy a property, you want find 2-bedroom apartment, let's say a South Bombay, not like a crazy South Bombay, but somewhere around in the area, maybe in that area, it won't be less than a crore. Maybe I'm estimating less, maybe more than 1.5 crore or 2 crore. which is crazy. Like a person who lives in Mumbai and makes a good living, let's say 60, 70,000, 80,000 rupees, I can say it's a good amount to settle down in Mumbai and survive upon. But then that person will never ever think of buying anything in Mumbai after like Andheri or maybe the south side of Bombay, because it's gonna cost him huge amount, and you have to be really rich, or maybe you have to have your ancestors' money to use to buy something. So that's why I feel that if I have a money here, I would rather invest in India, but not in Canada. The main reason is that I would like to talk about more on RRSP and what are the different options if we are not investing in RRSP.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to another topic which we discussed earlier about the universal transaction money, which is dollars.
Yeah.
So recently, not recently, but probably a year ago or so, I heard that India and other countries over there are making forming a group, and they've decided to use their own currency as a transaction currency, but not dollars. What do you think about it? Let's say if India and other big countries like Russia, India, Brazil, all these countries have decided not to use dollars, what will happen to United States economy, and what would be the impact of that on Canada? Because we follow US
Yeah.
like crazy.
So right now, I think US doesn't want that to happen. A lot of countries are trying that, especially Russia, uh, China also to some extent, but Russia even more. Like they want countries to not use US dollars because for them they face a lot of issues. They have like these challenges going back all the way to Cold War times, and then there are also so many sanctions which are there. So including like places like Iran, Turkey. All of these countries don't want to use US dollar. They want to come up with their own currency, but it's difficult to come up with a currency which everybody accepts. So it's not a closed. So right now we are so globalized that if two countries decide that we will use only this currency to transact with each other, that doesn't work because the economy is so interconnected that money it's so much more efficient to have one central reserve currency to work with because I'll buy oil in dollars. I pay for oil in dollars, and then if I want to transact for something else, and then I use some other currency for that, and then those people want to like sell oil and stuff like that. So it's all like you get it. It's so circular that it's just for one or few transactions. If we start using some other currency, or just two countries want to transact in a particular currency, it doesn't work like that. So because then they can't sell that currency. As we discussed, that money is essentially the most saleable good, right? If I want to sell it, selling money is basically buying something else. So if I want to sell money, it has to be the most saleable good in the market, and dollars are right now the most saleable. So it's where it's a point of liquidity, right? If a market does not have a liquidity for a particular thing, it can't work because these are such huge markets, trillions and trillions of dollars. So a smaller currency for that to have liquidity of US dollar or euro is almost impossible. So people can try, but it's not easy. So
We have seen the output. What happens if you decide not to use US currency and try to bargain with US? The example is Libya.
True.
Libya decided not to sell oil if US decides to pay in dollars because Libya wanted gold or maybe some another currency. And then you know what happened in Libya. Libya is not a country anymore. Civil war everywhere.
Craziness.
And not even Libya. Other countries were there as well who wanted to do business with US, especially oil in some another country, like set up some another standard, have silver, commodities, whatever you want, but not dollars.
They own, like basically there is the whole network of SWIFT network, what is called, right, for cross-border payments,
Right.
where all the money flows through the SWIFT network.
Yes.
It's a cooperative of all the banks together, but that essentially is controlled by US. And now if your whole tech network, which ensures cross-border payments of money, which is like the backbone of global trade, is sort of controlled by US, and also the currency that flows through it, which is US dollar, is controlled by US. It's very difficult to surpass that, and that's why like we will probably discuss about forms of money which are uncontrollable, right, and which can circumvent US, and that why they're so important.
And that's why I think US is very much afraid of bitcoins and.
Oh yeah, they are afraid, but they can't do much.
They can't do anything.
They can't.
But then
they can't touch it.
I don't want to touch this topic right now,
Yeah.
but still, What if it becomes the main transaction system
Yeah.
and not the dollars or anything else? What happens to the government and the economic system of the entire world? Because it's gonna impact everybody. Everybody will have a phone in their pocket. They do transaction and nobody can keep track of that.
Yeah.
Do you think again it's a very touchy subject, but then do you think the entire economy is going to crash and then it will resurrect from the ashes again?
Yes, so I have thought about it. There are two possibilities. One is this, where things crash and restart, and there will be a huge wealth transfer in the process, just like, how any sort of, when systems change, when things collapse and get reconstructed, there is a whole wealth transfer that happens. It will be a wealth transfer event if that happens. Or the other side will be like a slow decay, while the slow rise of the other alternate system to take over the financial system. So we know through US dollar that one currency is so much more efficient than having multiple currencies to do global trade. Now, if that one currency is not controlled by a government, that's even better than like having a US dollar kind of a thing. And if that currency is a strictly limited supply, which nobody can manipulate or control, just like gold is, and can be transmitted across the world in seconds, that's like the pinnacle of financial innovation that we can think of, which will probably help global trade become so much better.
But then we need to have that system to be completely ready to take over, because replacing one system to another,
Yeah.
it's kind of try and error.
Yeah,
Of course,
that's true.
right? You might like it, you might not like it. There are people who doesn't like to do any transactions using their phone yet, and they want to go to bank and do transactions. So
Yeah.
that phobia of what if someone will hack, which
Yeah.
can happen because you know how it is. Whatever you
Yeah.
talk, somebody's listening to you.
Somebody's
You have no
listening.
idea, but somebody's listening to
Yeah.
you.
But right now, I feel like economy is in a place where uh, I'm sure we keep hearing about recession and stuff like that, and we'll about how we have reached a stage where things are kind of very fragile. It's been going on for last 10, 11 years, the current expansion that we have. So it's possible that we see like a downturn, and depending on how the magnitude of that downturn is, what kind of alternate systems can show promise and people can move towards those. So we don't know, but yeah, it's possible. So that's where we are. Probably next 1 year, 2 year are very interesting, because as we discussed, like the retirement crisis that we have at hand, as well as the coming recession in the next 1 year or so, that's the expectation. Like right now, general sentiment is there. So it'll be interesting to see where
So
we
we
go.
were expecting for the recession to happen probably 7 8 months ago. I think that's what we were talking before we started podcast, and that time somehow get delayed, and
Yeah.
we are expecting the recession to happen probably 2020 2021.
Yeah.
2020 sounds very very eerie, right?
Possible.
Yeah, it can
Scary.
something can happen in
Can
2020
happen.
because that number is 2020. Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I think it's possible, because right now we were about to, like, right now, even if you see the bond markets, like what happens is bond markets is the first indicator of recession, and that has already flagged red last few months that recession is coming, because what happens is long term bonds spike in value, their yields reduce, and they reduce below the short term bonds, and that's called the yield curve inversion, and that's what you will see, that yield curves have inverted. So that's a general market sentiment, that it whenever it inverts, it says that the long term, like the market sentiment is very low and very bad. Every single time that has happened, there has been a recession in the next 7 8 months, every single time, last 50 years going back, and that has happened last few months. So that's why we say that probably expecting in next 7 8 months or so. But at the same time, government has started printing money, like as they always do. Not always, but 2008 they printed like $1 trillion just to bail out banks.
They had to, right?
They had to. Otherwise, the system would collapse. They printed like almost half a trillion right now in the last few weeks, even before the recession has started, and nobody's talking about it. So
I didn't even know about it.
nobody even knows about it. That's the interesting bit. So last time when recession hit and they started printing, everybody went crazy that, oh, there is quantitative easing. That's the word for printing money. They did that. Oh, there is 800 billion of bailouts and stuff like that. It was all over headlines, and people talked about it.
But your $1 doesn't even worth $1 if you start printing so much.
Exactly. So right now, what happened is, okay, it's a, in the summary, what happened is basically there is something called overnight repo market. So basically, this is the market where banks borrow from each other to maintain their overnight cash balances. So now RBC, at the end of the day, to close books, they realize, oh, they have 70 billion short, because of the amount of loans they give out and stuff like that. Now, probably they'll get it back tomorrow, depending on how much deposits are there. So just for overnight, I want to borrow it from BMO. So RBC borrows from BMO and stuff like that. This is US banking system I'm talking about. The same system there. So this is the borrowing market between banks.
So basically, it looks like all the banks are working like the independent body, and they're
Yeah.
working separately, but they all are actually collaborating internally.
Exactly.
Oh
So,
man.
so that market, there was a crazy thing that happened. That overnight market interest rate spiked from 1 or 2%, which was the regular rate always, because it's just overnight borrowing. It spiked to 10% overnight, and people started thinking, what happened? So somebody wanted cash so badly that they were ready to pay 10% interest. One bank wanted to borrow so badly that they were ready to pay 10% for overnight money. And that indicates that that bank, probably a very big financial institution, is kind of insolvent in some ways, right? Otherwise, nobody pays 10% for borrowing overnight. And
So
then
what do you mean by insolvent? So they don't have enough money.
they don't have enough money,
Oh.
because these guys never have enough money anyway. But now, if the demand for withdrawal
Demand increases, you have to produce
you
money,
have
and if
to.
you don't have it, you have to borrow
Yeah.
from other banks.
So it spiked to 10%, and next day Fed started printing, and they printed 200 billion, which is like 20% of 1 trillion in next couple of weeks. And then they are printing 70, 80 billion every single day since then. And this is 2 months ago. And now they're going to be printing almost over $1 trillion by next year. And the debt is, if you look at the US debt, it's just exploded last couple of years. It was 21 trillion last year. It's 23 trillion this year.
Wow.
So it's going parabolic, it's going exponential. So we don't know what is going to happen. This kind of exponential increase in debt is, all the economists right now, Keynesian economics, are like, oh, this is good, debt is great, debt is we owe it to ourselves, so it doesn't matter. But that's not the truth. We don't owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our future generations, who are going to face even bigger real estate prices, which they are not going to be able to afford, even higher student loans. Essentially,
So we're expecting that real estate prices will go down. Economy will try to settle itself.
Probably.
Try to be in a proper shape so that the future generation will be able to survive. But then it doesn't look like it's
doesn't
gonna.
look like it. No,
Yes.
not at all. But currently, in a debt-based system, it doesn't happen that way. The future generation always is more indebted than their parent generation. That's why the hate on boomers, the whole baby boomer
boomers.
meme, which is there,
Right.
it's because of that. People are blaming the boomer generation for putting so much national debt as well as student debt and all the inflation that we have seen. These guys are like, there is no inflation, but if you count all other realistic inflation which is there, student inflation, tuition inflation, the inflation is crazy. It's so they don't count all of that in counting inflation, so it doesn't show up.
Dude,
But
money problems. How people can be creative and artistic in such a situation? Do you think this money is killing artistic people, and
Absolutely.
it's not trying them to come out and then do that, because they are always depressed because they don't have enough money, so they cannot show their creativity.
yeah, man, if you think about it, if you have money, right, if you earn some money, you know that it's going to hold its purchasing power over the next 10 years. My $1,000 are going to be worth, right now, maybe say $10,000 is substantial amount of money. If we consider $1,000 is probably nothing, $10,000, if I keep it in my savings account, I don't want any returns. I'm an artist. I have earned that some way. I don't understand finances. I don't want to think about investments and stuff. I want to just keep it in my bank account, and 10 years later expect that I can purchase same amount of things with it. So then, if the money is not going bad every single day, I can focus on my art. I can focus on the creative aspects of it. Right now, everybody has to divert some part of their attention to preservation of their wealth, not increasing returns. Getting returns is like next, like that's the next step. Just preserving their wealth. You're just fighting inflation, and these are inflation which are hidden kind of inflation, right? Like they're printing money. That is a tax of its own kind. Like tax, though we are paying 30-40% on top of it, they're printing, so it's taking away my purchasing power. So essentially, most of the time for everybody goes into wealth preservation, which can go into your own craft. It could be creative, it could be your data science, it could be like, whatever it is that we want to focus on, we can focus on that if we don't have to worry about money every single day. And people have to. Right now, if you, the savings rate in Canada is 1%. 1% is the savings rate. That is so low, and people are too, like, recently in my company itself, there was a report, a general public report that was shared. 46% of Canadians are $200 away from bankruptcy. That is insane statistic.
I know.
People don't have savings. People are not planning for the future. People are just living paycheck to paycheck, and this supposedly is like the most booming economy that we have.
Do you think UBI will help universal basic income in this? Because you mentioned something that we don't have enough money, and what if we have enough money, people will do their stuff and they don't have to worry about it. Does that lead to the universal basic income concept? That I agree with another thing which you mentioned last time in the last podcast, that you don't need a strong government on your head who wants to get into your life every day, every second, and wants to check up on you what you're doing. You want somebody, a bigger body, which only you need. Whenever you need, you just go to them, and then whatever you dealing you want to do do with them, and then you know that on the higher level they are taking care of everything, but then they are not invading your privacy. They are not doing anything which actually makes you insecure, and you have enough cash flow coming and enough money so that you can work on yourself, groom yourself, so that you can do a better thing for the humanity. So doesn't that lead to a UBI concept?
Yeah, just like before going to UBI, I think is in general, if government was not taking away my purchasing power by inflating the money supply in general, I wouldn't need the UBI in the first place, right? My money, whatever I earn, in like prices would be in control because money supply is not increasing.
But then it's already happened. Oh, sorry.
It's already happened. I get it. Like that's a valid point. But if it had not happened, basically government created the disease, and now we want government to
find a cure,
right? So that's what UBI is in a way. But if it had not happened, then government just had to not intervene, just had to not play God by saying, oh, we need to increase the money supply, we need to give out more loans, we need to stimulate the economy, we need to quantitative ease and stuff like that. Then you wouldn't, like, your purchasing power will be staying over time, and you wouldn't need government's help in paying your bills. But right now we have reached that stage, so UBI in general would not, like, I personally don't think, I don't know how many sets of experiments have been done, whether it's been successful at scale and stuff like that. I know we discussed in the last time, but I feel that will just lead to more inflation, because you increase money supply, inflation increases.
Inflation, yeah, right.
That's the truth, universal truth, even at government level. I don't think that's any different.
Yeah, actually, I somewhat agree with you on that, because you know that you're making $1,000 or $2,000 extra. Government is taking care of you. If you go to get some grocery, probably whatever you're buying for $2, you might pay $4-5, and you won't care as well because you're getting free money.
Yeah, and if I'm a grocery seller, I know these are like essential items. You are gonna pay $10 if I ask you to, because you have extra $1,000. Why wouldn't you pay $10 for like essential, like milk or eggs, whatever it is?
Yeah, and I can give you a reason that I don't have enough supply. Nobody has enough supply. All grocers will make their own community or maybe a union, and they'll decide whatever rate they wanna keep, and nobody can do anything.
That's what happens, and that's what everywhere it happens. And like probably UBI might not be the best case forward, but essentially, like the booms and bust cycles that are there in economy, you need to let those happen. You try to kick the can further by saying that, oh, recession is coming, let me just print more money so that I can push recession to a few years later. Then it becomes even worse. It's like that whole analogy of having a drug addict, where you're keeping the economy on steroids, and then you become numb to that medication that you are taking, and then over time you need bigger and bigger doses to stimulate, to feel something, and eventually even that stops working. So right now, that's what has happened. The the government, like the Fed, has started cutting interest rates to stimulate the economy so that people will borrow more, people will, stuff like that. And right now they're at like 2%. There is not enough room. And if they start cutting when recession happens, last time they cut almost 4 percentage points to go down all the way to zero. This time, if they cut 4 percentage points, our interest rates will be negative 2%. Now we are talking about negative interest rates.
I was about to ask you, but that I've been hearing
It's
this
there.
title a lot. That world of negative interest
It
rates.
is coming. You will not believe this is the world we are living in. It's insane. Imagine having negative interest rates. You are paying to borrow, right? Or is the other way around?
Hey, you're
Yeah.
paying. You're borrowing $100. You're basically paying $10 extra on it.
No, you are earning $10 to borrow. You're earning to borrow.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're explaining the negative interest rate
Negative interest
concept.
rates.
Okay. Oh, so
with negative interest rates, if you keep your money in bank account, it
is it
loses money.
is that good or bad?
It's horrible. That's not how money works. Like it's
So-
insane.
So if I want to borrow $100 from you, you'll give me 110 because $10 negative interest, and I'll never gonna give you back that $10. You'll only get $100.
That's crazy. That's the world that is coming. And already in Europe, certain countries, certain banks have already started negative 0.5% deposit rate. It means if I deposit my in my bank account, it loses money over time. So nobody wants to save anymore because of that. So the incentive to save has essentially gone. Like nobody will want to keep savings in a world where there is negative interest rate. And I would want to borrow as much as I can because I'm getting paid to borrow. So I will buy 5 houses if I can. And imagine, I will probably start 5 businesses if I can. And what if all of those fail? That's okay. You can keep borrowing.
So soon you will see a long queue outside TD and BMO Bank just to borrow money because they are getting extra money.
It's crazy. Hopefully it never comes to Canada, but that's why all of these big institutions like IMF and all have started putting out research papers saying that negative interest rates are good, they work. Our research says that it works.
Are there any examples of
No.
any places they have tried this and how would this? Oh, okay. So
That's why
basically, there is no money. You're just borrowing something, but then it's just the trust words you're getting from the bank. You're using that to start your own business, and even if it fails, doesn't matter. You're not liable to anything.
They will just print more money to fill up that hole, whatever you created. So,
But then that is not because it's again going to increase the inflation because
Exactly.
printing money is not an option at all at
Yeah.
any point of time. What do you think?
Yeah, so that's where we are at right now. Printing money has become normal. Increasing national debt has become normal, and being in that state, having negative interest rates is being normalized right now through mainstream media, through everywhere. They're changing our psyche, our narrative in our head. They are putting that idea that it's okay to have negative interest rate because soon we will see that next recession, if US starts cutting rates the same amount of rates that they did in last recession, we'll have negative interest rates. So what will you do in that case? Will you you are being fed the information that negative interest rates work when we have zero examples of that? So probably people will be okay with that also, and then eventually it's the same thing, right? Bigger and bigger doses of stimulation to the junkie, so we don't know where the world, it's a very counterintuitive. You can't calculate any cash flows. How will you discount your future cash flows to present in a negative interest rate world?
So do you think digital currency will be a disaster saver? Like it will probably replace all the system, and then we will not have this negative interest rate issues or maybe any kind of issues because everybody will have a control over their digital currency and it will be easier. No transaction money charges, no interest rates on it.
So
what do you think?
There are two parts to it. Digital currency, if it's issued by the central bank themselves, then that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, because it's gonna be the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's one point. One point is that it's going to be the same thing. They can inflate money supply, stuff like that. Second point is privacy is gone. Your transactions are tracked end to end, and you can't circumvent the central bank. Central bank has even more control on your lives than before. So now, right now, cash transactions are the most private transactions that can ever happen. That's why the whole drug market, whatever, how many ever trillions of dollars, everything happens on cash, US dollar. Not banks, not anywhere else. It happens via cash and just US dollar. Just like bags and bags of US dollars. in cash, transported all across.
And
Because
narcotics? That drug?
yeah,
Okay.
through Mexico, through all whatever countries supply, everything is dealt in US dollar cash because they are untraceable. You can't trace that where was this, what was bought with this, and all of that. But now governments are pushing for digital currencies issued by central bank because they want to track all of that, and that also means that our transactions are tracked. They will be like, oh, you are purchasing from this weird website from China or something.
What is that? What
What
are
is
you
that?
doing?
We
Yeah.
don't like that. Why are you purchasing this from maybe say Libya or like any country that has a sanction? We will sanction you now as an individual. It's
Right.
possible. That world is now possible if they can track you. So your privacy, not only in terms of your data, in terms of social media, but your financial privacy goes away, and that's when you live in an authoritarian
So
world
they can peep into you all the
all the time.
activities, whatever you're
They know
doing.
where the money is going, how often you're spending. They can get a full picture about you. And that's why central bank issued digital currencies are a bad idea. But if there is a censorship, like a decentralized kind of currency, that's why decentralization is so important, right? Like nobody should be able to control any, especially something as important as money. So something like a decentralized currency would, which has a limited supply, is probably the best option in that kind of a world where we are seeing negative interest rates and craziness of inflation, stuff like that we have.
Do you see that the economy probably can go back to commodity again? People will start doing transactions in gold, silver.
But we have already seen, we have tasted the convenience of digital age. That's why it's impossible to go back
Go
to
back, yeah.
analog age where we used to transact in physical gold, keep gold coins in our pocket. That's impossible because now we are so
No, but
used to our smartphones.
no, what I meant was gold as a standard or commodity as a standard. Can be anything, spices, can be silver, anything. For like how we had gold as a standard to print money.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that same thing for digital currency? So we need something which every country has,
Yeah.
and which is very precious, like gold,
Yeah.
to decide whether how much digital currency we want to build. Because see, digital currency itself it's digital. You don't even need to print anything.
Exactly.
There's nothing physical. It's all gonna be internet and transactions and everything. People will start their own. They will have 10, 15 machines and start doing data mining and
Yeah.
what was that mining?
Mining.
Yeah, they will start doing mining and start making money out of it.
Yeah.
Do you think that even though digital currency probably will be a solution for the economic disaster, whatever it's gonna come in future, can be saved or can be controlled by having a benchmark of gold or silver or something?
So I don't think governments have the willpower or like they want to go back to anything in which they give away control. As we discussed, I think in the last podcast also, they will never give away control. Right now, they have full control of of money. Even though they are not in control, it's like a blind leading, driving a car or something with everybody, all of us in the passenger seat. But at least they are the ones driving. And if they go back to gold or anything, it takes away the power. Now they can't manipulate that currency, and they will soon go back to the same state where we are right now. So imagine you want to spend $1 trillion every year on defense. Now with gold, how will you do that? You don't have enough gold.
But then you won't do it.
You exactly. So that's the world we want to go to, but they don't want that world to come, right? They want to spend on defenses. They want to spend on their own power. So their power comes from their own sovereignty, which is defense, which is all of those industries which gives them power, right? Why do you think they spend so much on defense? Because it gives them power. So with gold, they can't do that because they can't produce more of it than their existing is, right? Like world wars happen because you can print unlimited money and take that away. Otherwise, you have to only rely on taxation. If it's gold based economy, your only source of income for a government is taxation. In our early ages, that's what used to happen, right? Like
Right.
we'll increase your tax and stuff like that, and that was the only source. Now they have found an alternate way, right? Now we'll just print. They won't even ask you for money. So that works for everybody. Like till it doesn't, but yeah.
So basically, generation changed, but people haven't.
People haven't.
Same. We are the
Yeah.
same. We just need to have armies, make people fight each other and then kill each other and then
So earlier
make
wars
money
used
out of
to
it.
end when money supply when you became broke, but when the government became broke. But now, in last 100 years, we have seen wars end when hyperinflation happens. Big difference. So earlier, government had to just go broke for the wars to end. Now everybody has to go broke for the wars to end. Common public, everybody, because they will hyperinflate your currency. Venezuela, that's what is happening. Like it's worthless piece of paper lying on road. You can't even buy bread with it.
True.
That's
Even
what
Zimbabwe was in a horrible
Same.
condition.
So like they want to take everybody down with them.
Okay.
So very interesting times.
I would love to talk to you about digital currency, cryptocurrency, and how we can utilize the idea of digital currency and how we can invest in it and get more out of it because you have been doing this for a really long time and I've got a lot of knowledge from you and thanks for doing that. Time doesn't permit that today, but then I would love to do another podcast with you on digital currency and cryptocurrency. So
Awesome.
tune in, guys. We'll have another podcast, and we'll do another podcast on digital currency and cryptocurrency. I have Aditya Dave with me. Can you just mention your Instagram?
Okay, I'm at Aditya the Way, ADITYA
And your Twitter handle as well.
Twitter is ABTCEFGHI. That's you can find me on that. Usually you will just find cat gifs on it. So nothing finance related. But yeah, hit me up on Instagram or any other place, or any other social media. I'm always reachable. Thanks a lot, Hardik, for having me today.
Awesome. So if you guys have any questions, please go to Aditya Dave's Instagram or Twitter. Shoot him all the questions, and probably he will answer if he have time. And that's the end of the podcast. Thank you so much, Aditya. It was
Thank you.
fun having you. See you, man. Thanks.
BRO-Jogan.